I don't know very much about you other than looking at your LinkedIn page, and it shows that you were the representative of American councils for almost 18 years there in
Yeah.
Vladivostok. And I don't know how much you know about the book and about me. So, do you want me to kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I can go first, or I would like to know more about what you're doing, but I've got more history here than just American councils. Um, uh, I guess I can, just to say I came in November of 1992 as one of the first Peace Corps volunteers to come to Russia and the former Soviet Union. So that kind of sets me. I mean, I'm in a little bit of a different category than uh, a lot of other people who came here,
Yeah.
and I was here for 27 months with Peace Corps serving as a Peace Corps volunteer, and in that time met my wife,
Uh,
and then went back to the U.S. to the Philadelphia area for a year, and then returned in 1996. And after that is when I started my job with American Councils.
okay.
So, I
Okay.
had, two, I mean, more than 2 years living here before working for American Council.
Right.
So, and it was in the early days, which were not easy
What? So
to put it
you
mildly.
first came to Vladivostok in 1992.
That's right. November 23rd, 1992, I
Did
arrived.
did you um did you have any Russian language at the time?
Well, I studied Russian at American University in the 74-75 academic year. I graduated from American University in Washington, D.C. with a bachelor's in international studies. So that was my real interest in Russia to begin with, I guess, or that's when that began. Um, so I had a little bit of, I mean, I knew the alphabet, and my pronunciation was okay. I was the teachers said that, I mean, my pronunciation was the best. I was put into the advanced class, or the class of people with people who had some language experience. But
Right.
it turned out I was not the best in terms of learning and being able to be, to get to be conversational. But
Yeah.
that's more a matter of temperament, I guess.
Right.
Um,
Right. So when the opportunity arose for the Peace Corps, how did you learn about that? Was there an ad?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. I was my older brother at the time worked for the U.S. Defense Department and was in Germany, living in, I guess, in Frankfurt. I'm not sure exactly. I don't remember exactly where he was now. Zweibrücken. But I went to visit him, and it was at Christmas '91, December '91, which of course was when Gorbachev made the announcement that the Soviet Union was dissolved,
Right.
and so I watched that announcement with my brother in Germany, and I don't know if you know the Defense Department's newspaper, the Stars and Stripes. It's
Right.
um, so I was reading a little article in that, and that said that they were planning to send 500 uh, Peace Corps volunteers to the former Soviet Union to help with developing small and medium-sized businesses. And I had just a year earlier completed an MBA, an executive MBA at Wilmington University in Wilmington, Delaware, and had worked for 13 years at Delaware County Community College and had been teaching some some business courses. So I was like, Frank, listen to this, and I read him this little article, and he's like, oh my God, that sounds like that's got your name on it.
Yeah.
So um, so it was just, it was straightforward from there. For me, I
Right.
definitely wanted to do it.
Right. And just at the time, what was your motivation for going? What did you really
Well,
want to accomplish by being part of the Peace Corps?
that's a, I don't know about accomplishing anything. I didn't have real, big, you know, goals or anything. I guess
Right.
it's not, it was more a personal thing, I think. Um, I had always wanted to live in another country, live in another culture, travel the world. I mean, that's why I studied international relations to begin with. Russia was a particular interest of mine, and learning language was a particular interest. And I chose Russian. I had studied, Latin and French and Spanish in high school, and wanted to do something that was different than other people.
Right.
So it was like Chinese or Russian.
Right.
I
Yeah.
decided on Russian, and it was always in the back of my mind. So it was sort of, I guess, kind of a midlife crisis. I was 38, 39 years old at the time,
Uh-huh.
and I had been working at a community college for years with people coming in saying, man, what are you doing here? You should be somewhere else. So
Yeah.
anyway, um, it was just an historic opportunity for me to, to be able to kind of fulfill a life dream, I guess.
Right.
Um, Able to go somewhere else and to be part of history.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that were happening were just unprecedented, and I mean incredibly interesting for to be part of that transition of going from communism and a command economy to democracy. And it was just all fascinating for me. And it wasn't a matter of, well, I'm going to go change the world or accomplish something specific. It was more just a personal level that I wanted to be friends with people.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And
So
so describe the process with the Peace Corps. Was there an application? Were
yeah,
there
yeah, that was
selection,
it was
training?
it. Well, the application, I guess, was they were really gung ho on this whole thing with the business people. So they were actually recruited in the Wall Street Journal. It was really an unusual group. You're usually the typical Peace Corps volunteer is like 20, I mean, 27 years old, I think, and just out of college, and that, where they had in this group, a number of MBAs and lawyers and retired executives, corporate executives. So it was the average age was 40. I was 38. I think I turned 39. I did. I turned 39 within 2 weeks of arrival. Um, so um, it was definitely an unusual group. So I was really proud to be part of that. And I put in the application. They don't guarantee anything with where you can go, but I made it clear that I wanted to go to Vladivostok.
Uh-huh.
I had read about Vladivostok when I studied Russian, back in 74, 75. So, and it was just one of those, those names and places that said, I want to go there someday.
Right.
It
Right.
was, so, and I mean, the diversity of the area is still, something that is really, and the location is really
Right.
attractive to me.
Right.
Anyway, the, being selected and getting medical clearance was kind of a pain in the neck, but eventually, it all got straightened out. It was definitely a hassle, kind of tying up all my affairs. I had to, sell my house and, quit my job and all that whatnot. I had a girlfriend at the time, so it was kind of it was a big deal, making
Right. Yeah.
this move.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I heard you ask about the training. Usually, um, in Peace Corps, you have a 12-week training period, which they decided to do in country rather than beforehand. We had I guess, a pre-departure orientation of 2 or 3 days. Maybe it was like a week. Like we came on Monday to Washington D.C., to Rockville, Maryland, to the hotel there, and then we left on Friday in late November. I guess it was November 19th or 20th,
Right.
and we arrived in Russia on that Saturday, complete with there were 100 of us. They were going to two different cities, Saratov and Vladivostok. So they
Huh.
split the group in two.
You didn't have anything to do with the group that went to Nizhny Novgorod then?
Well, there were no, I did not. There were
Okay.
groups. I don't know what you mean by the group that went to
Well,
Nizhny.
there were. I've talked to other people who were part of the Peace Corps that were in Nizhny Novgorod.
Okay, but there was never a group actually assigned to Nizhny Novgorod. There would have been individual volunteers that went to Nizhny Novgorod, I assume.
Okay, all right,
But there were,
there were several of them that were there.
there were many groups. Peace Corps was in Russia for 10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were many groups, and some of the people who were, they were they were the bases were Vladivostok and Saratov to begin with. So
Okay.
the people from Saratov may have been assigned to Nizhny Novgorod because
Oh,
they also had kind of a the country director, I think, was actually sitting in Moscow because you always needed something in Moscow. I mean,
right,
an
right,
administrative thing. So I mean, I really better not to talk to me about administrative
right,
stuff.
right. So,
But,
how many of you went to Vladivostok?
well, it was supposed to be 50-50. It actually turned out 51-49. 51 of us went to Vladivostok.
Okay,
And
and
then
then
we
what
had
did you do when you got
well,
there?
we had a 12-week training period, which was 12 week of language and um, um, oriented business. Um, I guess you call it cultural business and cultural training.
Yeah,
That we had people coming in and lecturing and telling us about the situation. We were housed at what it was called the Marine College, which was sort of a junior college training people to be merchant marines. In the merchant marine.
yeah.
So they were young guys, 17, 18 years old that like to just get drunk on Friday nights and fight. That was their sort of their form of entertainment. We were quite warned to not go outside, not be outside in the when it's dark, that it's dangerous, and we really didn't do much of anything. I mean, in terms of getting out, we were taken care of, fed meals and had a cafeteria, so we're served 3 meals a day, so that we didn't have to go food shopping and that. But and living in sort of a dormitory situation with roommates. Um, they called it a hotel, but it was of course the conditions were very different
Right.
than we would be used to in the United States. But
Yeah.
it was some ways really depressing and difficult to make. I was actually voted the most likely. Someone told me later that I was voted most likely to early terminate because I was obviously depressed and distressed by the whole situation, and it was more a matter of I knew that I wanted to stick this out, but it was going to be really hard. And the thing that I was going to be good at, if I stuck with it, was that I would get good to live in at being able to live in Russia. And
Right.
that was what I was, that it was not just a simple, decision like, do this for 2 years or not. I
Yeah.
was making a life-changing decision, and that was what really weighed on me. Did I want to be with this for the rest of my life or
And
not?
you saw it that way at that time, that
I did.
you were setting up the next stage of your life,
I
right?
did. I mean, I really thought that what I'm going to get from this is the ability to be here and to
Uh-huh.
stay here
Uh-huh.
and to be connected to Russia for the rest of my life. Yes.
Right. And so how long were you depressed?
Well, I mean, most of my life, really. So it wasn't really kind of a new thing. And I talked to one of an older volunteer woman, and she suggested that I go and speak to the Catholic priest that was here because they, have sort of pastoral training, and so I did that, and so I was talking to him for I don't know months,
Uh-huh.
and it was just more or less a process, I guess, of just getting kind of used to the whole thing. Something that happened that during this training, we had classes and lectures all day long, and getting up every morning and going to language class, and then going into the lecture hall and going through all these different trainings and I don't know, lectures and lessons. Anyway, there was a woman who was one of the teachers or counselors or administrative assistants, a Russian woman, and who spoke English very well. And she saw me in the hallway or on the staircase and just said, and yeah, I mean, I was obviously not happy,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
so she said she just asked me, how's it going, and I was like, it's all right. And she said, I really don't think uh, I don't think you guys are going to make it, really. I she said, I think too Russia's too tough on Americans. Americans aren't tough enough, and
Uh-huh.
and so and I was like, oh yeah, I'll show you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she's the one that really that was what really, was the turning point for me, or the critical point, I guess,
Uh-huh.
that I said, yeah, well, fuck you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
that's
this was still while the training was going on then.
yeah. This was like a month into the training.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
so that would you ask when the depression ended. I mean, that's a kind of a separate question.
All
But
right.
when I when I made this decision, was it was her who is saying
Right.
that
Right.
really made the point for me. And an interesting thing is that she has since emigrated to Canada, and I'm still here.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. And
So
so when you finished the training, then what? What were you?
yeah,
What,
I'll tell you, that
was
was
it?
really kind of a shock because we went from having our schedules completely taken care of. We were all supposed to be. The original plan was that this was a small and medium-sized business development project, and everybody was supposed to be set up into consulting centers, small business consulting centers, where we would work in like groups of five, like
Uh-huh.
five functional specialists, and do these consulting centers. Well, it didn't work out like that at all. The one thing that the sponsor, the organization that accepted a Peace Corps volunteer was required to provide housing. They
Uh-huh.
had to give us a place to live, and under with certain conditions. So I was assigned with three or four other people to it was called the Maritime Academy at the time, and it was supposed to be a consulting center. However, the people at the center, I mean, at this academy, didn't really understand or accept that. They were bringing us on as sort of hired hands they expected us to teach business classes.
Uh-huh.
So, that we were like free professors,
Right.
for them. And they also did not really, and they didn't have any appropriate housing for us. So even, we were trying to, or they were trying to renovate this building way outside the city in the suburbs, and had plans for the four of us to live in this building. With actually one of the people, the young woman, she refused, I mean, out of hand, to work at this place. So there were three of us, three guys, and they were trying to renovate this thing, and it never worked out. And they never really, they were at their system of education, or the way that they organized classes, was completely different. They
Right.
wanted to know, you know, they wanted to get specifically what we were going to teach, how many hours of class time we were going to teach, how many, and how many, what they called lab hours or something like that.
Right.
It was completely, I mean, and we were not, university professors. We weren't teachers.
Right.
That's not what people did. So we didn't know even how the American system worked, much less trying to, develop a course for their system. So it was really ridiculous. Anyway, that
Was there a Peace Corps supervisor that intervened or that you could talk to?
well, yeah, I
Or
mean, that's we had the Peace Corps administrators, of course, the associate director, and all of the Russian staff. So the thing is that most of the people, I mean, half of this group got assigned further north in Khabarovsk, and half was stayed in Vladivostok and the surrounding area. We didn't get people out so much to. I mean, there were some people that were sent to the smaller towns and whatnot, but I was stayed in Vladivostok, um, but they didn't have housing for us, so we had to stay in the dormitory of this hotel at the at the Marine College, to continue there. But we then had um, no continued support in terms of eating in the cafeteria and all that. We had to go out and find our own food and all. It was really kind of I mean, at that time, there was hardly any food on the shelves. I remember a friend of mine giving me directions and saying, you go past that ovoshi frutti store that has no ovoshi and no frutti. you know? And it was and the other thing is, it was interesting going out to buy food and trying, and you really need to learn how to shop in a different country.
right.
They do things completely differently. It's like, they had a whole fish, for example. You bought a whole fish. I don't
Right.
know what to do with a whole fish. I'm used to buying fish,
Right.
nice and pretty packaged and all filleted and all that. And then, of course, we had no utensils, and I mean, we might have had a kitchen and a refrigerator, but no plates and frying pans and that kind of stuff. So it was, and then there was hardly any food on the shelves anyway.
Right.
Besides that, restaurants were not service oriented. they closed for lunch, for God's sake. You know,
Yeah.
you go to a restaurant and it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's closed, and they're like, "Well, we got to eat too," you know.
Yeah.
You know? They had no concept of customer service, so it was really ridiculous. I was um, at the time a friend of an American that I met almost immediately. You may have even spoken to him, Richard. Um, you know, we became friends right away, and he was teaching an English class, and had a couple of people who they wanted to get some additional conversation practice. So I was meeting with these two, and at the one guy's house, and his mother would poke her head in the door and said, "Would you like? You want some fried potatoes?" And I would, you know, kind of shyly say, "Oh, you know, sure, I wouldn't mind." And you know, I didn't tell. It was my only meal of the day, actually.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was it, and you know,
Yeah.
so I kind of went there as many times a week as I could,
Yes.
so I could get the fried potatoes.
Get the
Yeah,
fried potatoes. This was
yeah.
93, 93.
This was, yeah. It would have been, we swore in on January 12th, 1993. So
Right. And
after the
so were there any hard currency stores in Vladivostok?
there were some hard currency stores, but we didn't have any. I didn't have any hard currency.
Oh, okay. So you
I
weren't
mean,
paid anything by
no, we were paid. We
in
they
rubles.
but they, you know, they came up with a. It was that was another interesting thing because they had no experience with, you know, how much we should get paid.
Right.
They they had promised that we would be able to live at the level of our counterparts, you know, that we were assigned to work with. But in many cases, those people were, you know, the rectors of universities and in high level positions that were really, um, you know, you know, it's, I mean, it's just such a completely different system that you can't really work it out. They came up with a figure of $55 a month for our living allowance, and you know they're dealing with 50 high-powered, energetic business specialists who were like, "Now, how did you come up with that figure?" You
Right.
know, and they just pulled it out of a hat. You know, they really didn't know where that came from.
That was
So
they being the Peace Corps
Peace
administration.
Corps administrators, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they
Right.
just said that it seemed like a you know a fair rate or something, but and we were given that money in rubles,
In rubles.
at,
Okay.
and
Wow.
so we didn't have to pay rent, so that basically that money was for food,
Yeah.
and I just know it was, you know, there was not much food available. There was an American business going on trying to, you know, bringing in some, you know, some American products. There was a thing called Globus, you know, so you just went around the stores and tried to find whatever you could. But,
Yeah.
you know, you go into these, you know, the old Soviet stores, and there would be just some, you know, rotted up carrots and onions and cabbage and like nothing on. And, you know, going into the markets, and there's, I mean, these big stores, and the meat cases would be empty, and you know, they were chopping up meat on tree stumps outside, you know, selling the meat off of the hoods of cars, and I mean, just, you know, just, I mean, nothing like living in the United States, you know.
Right.
It
Right.
was
Right.
and just trying to. I ended up being invited by a host family to come stay with them because this, you know, the situation with the sponsor didn't work out. But and you know, it was a mother and daughter who really, I mean, they fed me and took better care of me. So
And
that's really, I mean,
yeah.
I survived by the kindness of Russians, to tell
Right.
you the truth.
Were they paid by the Peace Corps to take
No,
care?
no, these people just, you know, they had nothing to do with Peace Corps.
Really?
We were all assigned host families to when during the 12 weeks of training,
Right.
and those people were paid. They did receive money in order to feed us
Yeah.
and to house us. So we had both situations. We could stay with our host family, or we could go back to the dormitory and stay there if we wanted. We had uh, both things available to us.
Right.
So
So I was told that the Peace Corps was the first sort of aid program because it was the administratively most prepared. There was no USAID presence. There was no infrastructure to support American aid assistance. And that Baker wanted to demonstrate, James Baker wanted to demonstrate U.S. commitment to Russia. The Peace Corps was it because it was administratively capable of deploying people. Doesn't sound like they were that administratively capable from what you're describing.
I think that's accurate. That they were the most capable, but that doesn't mean they were sufficiently capable
Right,
and
right,
effective enough. It
right,
was when we arrived there. I think the group, the team that came had been here for a month, making preparations and connections, and
right.
setting up this kind of training program, and lecturers and connections with specialists and economists and people in the government and the university. So they really did a remarkable job, considering what they were dealing with.
Right.
And I mean, I never heard James Baker's name associated with all this before, so that's a little bit of a surprise. But I did talk to, I don't remember the guy's name, but he worked for the State Department as a consultant, I guess, or for Peace Corps as a consultant.
Yeah.
And he said that he had the original idea of, setting up these groups of small business consulting centers,
Right.
which never worked out because it didn't fit. It wasn't appropriate.
Right.
And you couldn't get, the ideal. That would have been the ideal situation, but that's not how it worked. In terms of this USAID money, they definitely announced that money was coming. That the U.S. had committed something like $900 million, or I forget the figure, to aid projects in Russia, and that the problem was that Russians thought that we were the representatives, the Peace Corps volunteers were the ones that were going to distribute that money. I mean, I didn't realize that at the time, but it came to me later that they would call us in or try to impress us with their projects and proposals, and trying to get us to, they thought that we were making the decisions about who would get that money.
I see.
And that was a real confusion that was difficult to overcome, I think.
Yeah. And were you, was the Peace Corps in Vladivostok, did it partner with the city administration or the oblast or the regional administration?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that would have to be absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand all of those, those political connections, but they would have had to.
Yeah.
Had the support of the CRY administration, and the same in Khabarovsk and all of the administrative regions that they went to. We had to have, we were constantly, having to turn in our passports, get these visas renewed and get things, taking pictures, and that there was a whole Russian staff that was taking care of all this stuff. So I
Right.
didn't really know a lot of what was going on, but in later years and working with American councils, understanding more about visas and having to have the specific names of the cities and towns where you were going, and not being able to check into hotels or being charged different rates, and things like that. It was really, there were a lot of administrative bureaucratic red tape for sure.
Right. Right.
Um, but
Now, was it obvious to you, or was it discussed at the time that this had been a closed city because of its military significance?
well, I knew that, and we were told that, of course, in the orientation. Um, what do you mean by obvious?
Well, well, obvious in the sense that there were people watching you, or people who were sort of concerned about who you were. I mean, this is the early days of post-Soviet
Yeah.
times.
Well, um,
Were you spies, or,
well, I mean, that's how it eventually came out. I mean, after 10 years, uh, Peace Corps was kicked out basically because they decided that they were spies, that they were all
uh-huh,
spies. But that definitely people were skeptical. They didn't understand what Peace Corps was. If we, what and um, I was sitting with, some English teachers. One of the first holidays that we had, I guess it was probably March 8th or something like that in '93, and they were laughing like, oh yeah, we're such a, we're so poor. We're sitting here drinking champagne and eating caviar, that
right, right,
we really need a lot of help. So that they didn't they resented the idea that the United States was helping.
yeah,
That they
uh-huh,
don't we don't need your stinking help.
okay,
We just need, and the business people were like, we just need your money to get something started here. We don't need your advice. We need money to get this rolling.
uh-huh,
And
uh-huh,
it was more that kind of attitude. I do have to say that as far in terms of mistrust, and that regular people were incredibly interested in the United States and in meeting Americans, and were really fascinated by us, and really, um, you know the majority of people definitely wanted to get to know us, and were very friendly, generous, and hospitable.
right.
It
So
was it
as
was it
you'd
was
meet
really
strangers on the street would invite you to come to their house.
well. We had one of our first sort of assignments. It was actually my birthday weekend. We arrived on November 23rd. My birthday was December, and that weekend we had a See Russia weekend, they called it. And
Uh-huh.
so everybody had to go in small groups to smaller towns. I went with a group of 5 people to a place called Mikhailivka, which was a village just north of Vladivostok, and they told us it was it still is an agricultural community where they raise chickens and do a lot of the farm products here. Um, anyway, they people were like, "Man, you are the first Americans that have ever been here."
Yeah.
So it was really, an amazing experience. The hotel was in terrible shape, but on a Saturday night, it was the happening place. It was where you could go to the restaurant, and then it turned into a disco. And I was not drinking at the time. I had uh, had given up drinking like 2 years before that, and I wasn't smoking cigarettes, so I was really pretty clean, And then and for the few years before going into Peace Corps, but and it was a good thing because I was able to dance and keep up with them, and it was we just had a hell of a time. It
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
hell of a lot of fun. I didn't get drunk and fall down like you might think, but
Right.
it turned out that that drinking thing was um, it was sort of a problem. We were invited to many official functions and meetings and that where the CRY officials and all of these sponsors and whatnot. And of course, Russians, they drink vodka. That's what
Yeah.
they do with any kind of celebration. And I would refuse and say I don't drink. And they were downright offended, and they were like, "You're not going to drink with me?"
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
it just did not compute for them.
Right.
And eventually, in January, I was invited. Well, Richard Thomas got married, and I went to his wedding party at his apartment. The only thing available, I mean, there wasn't even water. We didn't even have bottled water at that time. So there was beer, champagne, and vodka, and
Uh-huh.
maybe some bottled juice from Korea. But eventually it was like, oh, Jesus, give me a beer. There was nothing else to drink,
Right.
and then a friend of mine was like, "Oh God, Dennis, you're drinking beer. Next thing you'll be smoking cigarettes." I was like, "That's a good idea." I hadn't thought of that. So that was kind of the beginning of my conversion, I guess. But I have to admit that life got a lot easier when I sat down and started drinking vodka with people.
Uh-huh.
It
Uh-huh.
made it much more interesting. They were much friendlier, much more accepting, and I was more one of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it made a big difference.
Right. So what did you end up doing for work? What were you
Well,
end
it
up doing?
turned out that I mean, this whole maritime academy thing did not work out. Richard at the time was he's a master linguist and a Russian language expert, and he was doing translations. Well, basically working for the newspaper, the daily newspaper called Vladivostok.
Right.
For the editor hired him to do kind of a news summary in English, just
Uh-huh.
kind of a column in the Russian paper once a week to take all the articles and sort of summarize them. And then that turned into an actual English language newspaper where he would take the articles that were written by Russian journalists, get them translated, and then we put them into a 4-page newspaper, which eventually turned into an 8-page thing, and it was called the Vladivostok News in English. So they agreed to bring me on as a Peace Corps volunteer. I was kind of considered the business manager, that although that's not what I did, because they completely controlled the whole thing and made all the business decisions, and and making a profit was not their objective. All they wanted was to have an English paper.
Right.
So I ended up being more like not a translator, but an editor of the translations, and I did the copy edit. I also distributed the newspaper, taking it around to all of the restaurants and hotels and any place where Americans or English speakers would be interested in having a copy. We basically gave them out for free. We had a run of 400 copies a month, and I took them around to all the places and delivered them basically.
Uh,
But I
and
can,
there was enough of that community that wanted an English language.
at that time there were a lot of people here. I used to call them the Brat Pack, because or the it was a bunch of young guys that were very smart, very talented in terms of just really savvy entrepreneurial types,
Right.
trying to make their way. I remember one guy who was representing Apple computers, and he would say, "I am Apple." You know, he was a really cocky son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Um, but they were it, 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 it they seemed to have some money. I'm not sure exactly, you know, where they were, you know, how things were working out, but compared to the Peace Corps volunteers, that guy in particular was able to, you know, go into a restaurant and order food and get a decent meal, where we were always, you know, kind of scrapping and pinching, you know, trying to save money, figure
Right.
out where, you know, and so and there was just a whole by 95, which is I left February 16th, 95, but by, you know, 94, 95, there were other projects. There were like Catholic Relief Services was a big one that had a I can't remember what they called it, not bartering system, but a way of distributing their aid where they would um, I can't remember exactly how it worked. It was very complicated to me. They would bring in stuff and then sell it, and then, you know, get that money to other charitable organizations
Uh-huh.
somehow. I forget exactly what they called it, but if you can talk with some of those people, I think they could. You know,
Uh-huh.
that was a successful program. Eurasia Foundation was going. I know these two guys. I don't know if you know, if you've heard of Eric and Allegra Azule, but
No.
Eric and a guy named Andy, they started a business doing logistics. Basically, it was you know, shipping
Right.
stuff, and these people. It was a group of people who had been on something called the exhibit. That they it was a traveling exhibit that had been sponsored by the State Department back in '91, maybe, um, where they traveled across the United States doing these exhibitions and shows, you know, to showcase the U.S. products and U.S. You know, U.S. culture. So
Right.
these were young, recent college grads who spoke Russian,
Uh-huh.
and they were brilliant, really. Um, Allegra, the wife in the duo, um, she was one of the first people to work for American councils uh, for, you know, international education. It was called
Right.
ACTR back then, the American Council of Teachers of Russian. Now, and they were here. I was introduced to them in '93. So they began. I mean, those there was under the Freedom Support Act, you know, the State Department sponsored. There was a it was called they called it Bradley program because Senator Bradley from New Jersey, you know,
Right.
started the whole thing. But they had it eventually became called the Flex program, which took, you know, Russian high school students to the United States for an academic year to live with the host family and study in an American high school. And that's the program. That's who I eventually ended up working for. But
Oh,
there was, you know, that organization. There was also IREX was in town. So there were a number of people who were working for what they called technical assistance providers, you know, from non-government organizations that were funded by the U.S. government for U.S. government programs.
right.
And that's in addition to, or you know, on the side of these USAID. I never quite figured out the USAID projects, but there was TUSRIF, the U.S. Russia Investment Fund, you know, that
Right.
was trying to do this giant supermarket project, which was a complete bust. But, you know, Richard,
Yeah.
but he had a guy named Dave, who was a brilliant, um, you know, Russian speaker and just an all-round smart guy. who is quite successful today in New York City. Eventually got an MBA from Wharton. Anyway, he's all of these guys were, and I wish you could get in touch with these people, because they really are the core of what was happening here.
Right.
And the whole sense of entrepreneurship and hope, and that this can really, we can really make something of this. And I think, in terms of the Peace Corps project, kind of coming in and trying to act like they were going to give advice and tell Russians how to properly do business,
Right.
is just, it's completely stupid. That they would think that they could be, that would be successful. Russians didn't know themselves. I mean, Russian business is for Russians,
Right.
and they're going to figure out. I mean, it's buy low, sell high is not hard to figure out.
Right. Right.
And they were going to do it their own way, no matter, they're not going to listen to somebody else. And you're dealing with, I mean, basically mafia situations where the city was broken up into, like 5 or 6 different groups that were vying for control of the whole thing. And
Right.
I mean, it was downright life and death situations. When, if I remember one girl saying that when I was still in training, that, she said that, her dream, she would love to open a cafe and just have a nice little outdoor cafe like they have in Europe, and she was like, well, let's do that. And she's like, there's no way I could never do that. And there was we had no Chinese restaurants. There were no Chinese restaurants in Vladivostok back in those days. And I went to, somebody invited me to a Chinese dormitory one night on a Sunday night, and they were cooking up a storm, and it was friggin' delicious. It's like, why don't you guys have a restaurant? And they're going, are you crazy? The mafia would never let us do that.
Right.
And it was, anytime, I mean, the whole economic situation was such that, and anytime you were dealing with what would be a microeconomic situation in the US, you immediately ran into macroeconomic problems that you had no control over.
Right.
And
Right.
it was, to start a business, talk about, obstacles to entry. You could literally be killed
Right.
if you became successful.
Right.
And it was, it was totally trying to be controlled. I mean, even today, they've, well, I mean, since Putin took over in the early 2000s, it's come under Moscow control, and Moscow has really taken hold of that, and that's what really kind of settled cooled down the criminal situation, I
Right.
think.
Right.
But it's it and and that's why people love Putin, because he really got control of the whole thing, and really made the place prosperous.
Right.
So,
But back in 92, 93,
yes,
so there were foreigners, there were Americans there.
yes.
How did they manage to do business?
I don't know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, I really don't know. I think there's another guy that you should talk to if you can. He's not an American, but his name is Martin. He is from New Zealand.
Uh-huh.
He came, I think, in 1995, but I know that he's basically an agribusiness and was importing Australian and New Zealand products, especially Anchor butter was a big thing to be bringing in. So
Right.
most of it was about importing, I think, and
Uh-huh.
especially foodstuffs were a mainstay.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's another guy. I don't know if you've heard of a guy named David Edick. He is in San Diego now. He's been president of the San Diego Vladivostok Sister City Association and also of the World Affairs Council in Southern California there. But he was here back in 93. Actually, his son was born in October of 93. He came with associated with a company here called ACFES. I don't know if you've heard of them, but that was a big company back then. ACFES, ACFES, and he Dave he had a small company himself called California Trade, I think it was called, but he ended up marrying his translator, and they had a son in October '93. So he claims the fame of having the firstborn Americans you know
Yeah.
son
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Vladivostok.
Right.
But he's still associated with Vladivostok and really he's a political economist, I guess, and does a lot of analysis and would really be able to tell you a lot about, how what keys to success there were back
Yeah.
in those days. I think if you wanted to contact him, I can
How
send
would
you
you spell his last name?
Edick, David Edick
Okay.
Jr.
Okay. I'll see if I can track that down, maybe through LinkedIn or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's on LinkedIn, and also he's a pretty popular. I mean, it's not famous, but he's pretty well known, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I've found that if I put a person's name and then the word Russia next to it, usually it comes up, you know.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There aren't so
Well,
many.
he's definitely based in San Diego.
Yeah. But would you say there were 100 foreigners, 200 foreigners,
You
300?
know, when so you're talking foreigners,
Not just
um,
Americans.
not just Americans, because I remember, the courier services, what's it called? DHS, DHL, right. There
DHL.
was a guy with them who was German. I would say at least 100, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
in this group. And, people used to ask me about how many Americans are in Vladivostok. And I would say, and I'm talking at the late 90s, well, I used to say there are probably 50 Americans, but 25 of them are the Mormons, and that includes, the 6 or 7 diplomats at the consulate.
Uh-huh.
But and of course, the consulate was always involved in this.
Yeah.
They treated Peace. It was interesting because they didn't treat Peace Corps volunteers as anything special. They really weren't interested in us. We weren't invited to the July 4th parties, for example,
Really?
or for Thanksgiving or anything like that, because they were more interested in trying to, curry favor or get relationships going with
I see.
Russian officials. So, the Peace Corps for them were just a pain in the ass, a bunch of sponges trying to, get a free meal.
Wow.
So it
Wow.
was
Yeah.
kind of a nasty situation.
And there were a lot of Mormon missionaries at that time.
Well, eventually the Mormons, and this is probably 10 years later that the Mormons became such a big presence. But yeah, that it's one of their missionary sites. How they have to do 2 years of overseas service, and
Right.
and I was always amazed at those guys. I've always been really shy about speaking Russian and
Yeah.
being obviously a foreigner, and since I had studied, I really wanted to speak perfectly and not,
Right.
think that if people not know right away that I'm not, Russian,
Yeah.
which it was an impossible thing to even consider. But it took me 2 years really before I, started speaking. Actually, I guess a year, and it was only because of my wife, who did not speak English, and we've always spoken Russian together,
Yeah.
that it forced me to start speaking. Anyway, it always amazed me that these Mormons could come in and go, dressed in their, white shirt and ties and dark pants and whatever, and go around knocking on doors, and people, I mean, everybody getting steel doors, and you don't open your door,
Right.
to any knock that comes on. So they're talking through the door, people saying, "Who are you? Who's there?"
Right.
And talking to these people in Russian, and explaining what the hell they're doing on their doorstep as a
Yeah.
Mormon missionary. I mean,
Right.
my God, wow, what an assignment, and
Yeah.
the fact that they could have any success at all is just remarkable to me.
Yeah.
And I think they're still here. I mean, and they've even spread out. They've been assigned up into Yakutsk and Magadan and
Wow.
Khabarovsky Krai, and they. I'm not sure they're still here, but I know that the main office had been here until a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think that there was um, government interest in getting them out.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Because and this whole thing of foreign agents and what got our organization in trouble back in 2014, where they were re-registering all of the non-governmental organizations, and that you had to register as a foreign agent, and especially if you received any kind of funding from a foreign source,
Right.
and this whole thing of all of these different revolutions, the Rose Revolution and the Orange
Right.
Revolution and all that, they were convinced that all of these U.S. government programs were designed and intended for influencing Russian society to be able to, actively protest against the Russian government.
Right.
And so they were inherently opposed to the Russian government. And I think then that, frankly, there's some truth to it. Although, I mean, I worked in it for 18 years, and consistently denied that was the intention, that we were only trying to help,
Right.
and that all of our programs were not, trying to be a brain drain and take away the best and brightest from Russia, but we actually committed to the opposite, that people had to return, that they were not eligible to, get into an immigration status in the United States while they were on programs, and they had to return to their home country, and they were selected on the basis of, what their intentions were and how they would contribute to Russian society and Russian development,
Right.
not on how they could help the United States. So it was, I mean, that's what I did for a living.
Right.
But there's, it just, and I'm very proud of the fact that I have many friends. I mean, I've interviewed thousands, literally over 2,000, almost 3,000 people for these programs, and mostly Russian teenagers.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of Uncle Den. I come from a large family, so I've got 37 natural, uh, you know, nieces and nephews. So
Wow.
I've been Uncle Den for since I was 11 years old.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of figuratively Uncle Den for literally hundreds of Russians,
Right.
and all over the Russian Far East. I traveled, as part of my job, I traveled to the 10, 11 major cities in the Russian Far East every year, doing recruiting and testing and interviewing. So I've got friends all over the Far East here, and people who respect and love me to this day.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's a testament. So, and you left and then you came back.
Yeah.
Why did you leave and why did you come back?
Well, it was time to leave. The program was over.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't have had the visa support or anything. So I had to leave. The
Okay.
one thing is that you were given the option of a plane ticket back, or they would give you the money and you could find your own way back. I
Yeah.
was the only one who actually took the plane ticket because I really had no international travel experience, and had no money. And my
Uh-huh.
biggest fear was going back was that I really had no place to go.
Yeah.
I come from a large family, but everybody's got their own lives. And I called my brother, my one brother, before leaving, and said, you know, uh, could I come stay with you for a couple of months before, when I
Yeah.
first get back to get reestablished? And he said, no, it's
Yeah.
not going to work. So my fear was, flying into Philadelphia airport and getting a taxi and not having anywhere to tell him to take me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A friend of mine joked that he said, well, just tell him, take me home. And when he says, well, where's home? You say, no, I mean, with you. So, and that's almost literally what happened to me. I mean, I did a couple of friends who lived in a small row house in Philadelphia, took me in for a couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
and then I moved around to a few different places and trying to find a job. When I left, I promised Lena that I would either get a job that would be good enough to try to bring her over to the U.S., or that I would come back.
Uh-huh.
And after a year of looking, and eventually I ended up moving in with my brother and his family, who lived an hour away. I got working part time again at the community college, where I had worked for 13 years. They sort of took pity on me, I guess, and gave
Yeah.
me something to work with, and was trying to get reestablished, but it was just not working. And I was, communicating, sending emails with Lena, and eventually Richard, wrote me a letter and was like, just come back here. You got people, you got a whole support system here. You've got a life here. You
Yeah.
can make it here. You can do it here. And a mutual friend got me an invitation from what's now Vladivostok State University, GUES they call it, Vladivostok State University of Economics and Service. So they gave me an invitation, and I taught a couple of classes there
Uh-huh.
for them. I came back March 26th, 1996, and moved in with Lena, and so we've been living together for 25 years now.
Wow. Yeah.
Then she by I did these, kind of half-assed, the business classes, and doing some private English lessons. And then eventually the job opened up with American Councils. I started working for them August 29th, 96, and did that for years.
Right.
by Christmas time, Lena and I were able to take a trip to the U.S. So she could meet my family and friends. And while we were there, we got married on
Uh,
January 2nd in Elkton, Maryland. So 97. So we're
90.
coming up on 25 years of marriage, and we have a daughter who was born in 98. She just graduated from the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point and began a job as a software product analyst for Century Insurance Company in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. So
Wow. Wow.
she's she's a remarkable, um, bilingual, bicultural, binational.
Right.
So it's um, it's it's really, I mean, the whole Peace Corps moving to Russia, it changed my life. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it is my life now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you didn't change Russia. Russia changed you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
And
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Mm.
Well, I mean, I just, um, I was talking to Martin a few months ago, but when we first proposed this interview, and I told him, what I knew of your project, and he was like, he's got to come here. You got to get him to come here and talk to people like us, because
Right.
he's going to do the same thing that everybody does. They're going to try and make this like it was that the American programs were a failure, but they're not. They're and then Martin feels like he and I are symbols of the success of these American programs. That
Okay.
these were not not a failure at all. That if it's the whole thing of improving relations and kind of one person at a time, developing partnerships and good relations between Russian and American people, that's what he and I are all about. And
Uh-huh.
in those terms, I think we've been incredibly successful, and I've really taken it on as my mission in life to continue to improve, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Uh-huh.
people to people, person to person relations, and I intend to do that.
Yeah.
The um, the um, the one interesting thing that I started to say is that I just love Russian people now. Um, there's they have this reputation. I guess it's a complex society and a complex character. I think that they have sort of this duality, this kind of combination of superiority and inferiority complex complexes going on at the same time. And I've always thought that there's a big difference between the outside Russian and the inside Russian. When you first come here and you meet people on the street, they seem like they couldn't be, colder, rude, insincere, get out, get away from me, I'm not interested. And it just very unwelcoming, especially to foreigners.
Uh-huh.
But if you go inside, if you go to their homes and get inside their, to be invited into their lives, they could not be more hospitable and warm and generous.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I have also experienced that. So I understand what you're saying. And I think the whole question of failing or succeeding is an interesting one, because if the intention of the program was to make Russia look like the US, then all those programs failed, and they had no chance of success from the beginning. But in terms of integration of Russia into the world, I think they were a great success or great utility, let's say, in
Yes,
helping that process to take place.
I
Um,
agree.
you
And
know,
your one interesting question on your in your the thing that you sent out to me.
right.
It says, "Do you agree that Russia ended up rejecting the U.S. model for its economy and institutions? If so, why do you think this happened?" And I don't know that there was any intention of. I mean, the question, I don't understand the question really.
Okay.
Of rejecting the U.S. model for economy and institutions. Russia's going to do what Russia's going to do in its own way, and as far as I understand, the Russian Constitution is modeled on the U.S. Constitution. So I don't see that as any rejection of American institutions. Um, that
Yeah,
it,
I guess, I can explain the question, but I don't know that it'll make it any much different for you. I think it has to do with, the question has to do with um, mm, things like how capital markets developed. So in the US, capital markets through stock exchange and stock ownership are important ways to allocate capital to businesses. And when the reforms started, Americans were heavily involved in creating the stock market and in the programs for distribution of shares to individuals that were then supposed to be exchanged on the stock market in a way that mimicked the US. That's not what happened, and the stock market was really only became a place for foreigners to invest, and
uh-huh.
the actual allocation of capital was done by Russian banks, done in a much different way than the market economy works in the US. So,
I see.
there are people who say, and I'm not proposing to say it, that the question is supposed to provoke a reaction.
I
And
see.
so,
Well, I
that was
see.
my intention with it.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I guess you succeeded for me in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
to me, this another person that was here, and probably Gary referred you to him, but he was here when I first came as a Peace Corps volunteer. A guy named Andrew Fox.
Yeah. I spoke with him.
Yeah, then I mean he was, here buying up vouchers and to try and created a securities company, Tiger Securities. Um, so I mean, I'm sure that you got a lot of information from him on that.
Yes. Yes.
I think this whole economic development and capitalism thing is really, I think that just to understand it, it's all about self-interest. I mean, Adam Smith even says that, right? you know,
Right.
Everybody's after their own self-interest, and I think that's how, that that's what happened in Russia. That people took advantage of however they could to promote their own self-interest, given the situation that they were presented with.
Right.
And that was a completely different development and different circumstances that created the development in the United States. So I think it would be really unreasonable to expect things to develop as they did in the US.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I agree with you that that's an unreasonable assumption, but I do think there were many people who made that assumption in the
yeah,
early days that
right,
in over the course of a generation, the Russia would be integrated into the European, US led world economic and trading system and would look a lot like the US, and maybe not immediately, but
Yeah.
the rule of law, contracts, arbitration courts, doing business through tenders, things like this, which were antithetical to the way Russians do business. You don't
Yeah.
do business with someone you don't know.
Right.
And you don't usually do business with someone you didn't go to school with. I mean, it's
Yeah.
our family. So there were unreasonable expectations. But
Right.
on the other hand, I think there's an overlooking the extent to which Russia has been integrated into the world economy, but and and in trading and in travel and in Moscow is a big European city. You
It
know,
sure is.
yeah,
Yeah, and it I think that it has been integrated, as you're saying, um, to a greater extent than people maybe want to admit, and that it's the politics that really have screwed things up. And
yeah,
the thing that really annoys the hell out of me is the American attitude that they know best and that they can tell Russia or treat Russia as if it's some kind of a recalcitrant child, that needs to be taught a lesson, you
right,
know, and it's, Russia and Russians are not going to put up with that,
yeah,
you don't, and nobody is. Americans would be like, get the fuck out of here,
right, right,
you come in and try and tell us what to do. I mean,
right.
it's just, it's just
Well,
ridiculous.
my impression is that in the early days after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Russians needed foreign expertise, uh,
Well,
for skills, for things that they didn't have because they just didn't exist in the Soviet
right,
system. And that over that course of 10 years, they got all those skills. And so the need for foreigners just kept decreasing over time,
right,
particularly
right,
after the 1998 crisis. So,
right.
um, so it was a natural evolution as much as anything. But at the same time, I do remember hearing people say, Americans have to stop telling us how to live. And
Yeah,
I think that sentiment also grew at the same time. Would you agree with me?
I would. Yes, absolutely. I think it's true. I think this, the idea of needing kind of technical assistance or expertise is one thing. They're fast learners. You don't have to hang around and tell them in detail what to do. It's
Right.
like, okay, got it.
Yeah.
That um, and they're going to do, no matter how it worked, in other situations, they're going to adapt it to their situation and their way of doing things and their way of looking at things.
Right.
So it's, it definitely needed to be, I mean, it was definitely more flexible than, the model might have, um, required or whatever. But,
Right. Right.
um, Russians, they, they, I mean, they're incredibly resourceful and work things out. You
Right.
know,
Right.
no matter what it takes. I mean, that's I like to think that I've influenced them in some ways, especially with um, I don't know. What am I trying to say? Looking at it from uh, customer service, I guess. The
Okay.
idea of, looking at things from the customer's point of view and not
Right.
just doing things because this is the way we've always done it.
Right.
I worked with, I had three or four Russians on staff, and whenever you go to do something, um, the first Russian reaction is, it's not going to work. No, we can't do that. That's
Right.
not going to happen. And then you have to, kind of work with them a little bit, and then after a while, it's like, okay, well, maybe we could do that, and then they, you get them on, and then once they're on your side, they make it happen.
Right.
And the thing is, they're like working with my accountant and other people where they'd say, no, you can't do that. That doesn't work. It's not going to happen. I'm like, you don't understand. We are going to do this. I need you to help me figure out how we're going to do it correctly and properly
Right.
and within the law. We're not gonna just not do it because you say it doesn't work.
Right.
We're going to do this. Now help me figure it out.
Right.
And when they realize, I mean, I think that they learned from me too,
Uh-huh.
that
Uh-huh.
there's, things are possible and you can make things happen.
Right. Right.
Um,
So what would you say is the lasting impact of American councils on the Russian Far East?
who of American councils.
The American councils, American council programs on the
I mean,
Russian Far East.
these are all, U.S. government programs. I mean,
Yeah.
so um, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who even recognizes the name of American councils. But I think the long term effect is that there are thousands of people, Russian people, who have been to the United States and have, um, a lifelong affinity and commitment to American people
Uh-huh.
that they will never go back. I mean, they'll never um, go to a point where they say that Americans are terrible people and that they want nothing to do with them. It's never going to happen.
Mm.
They're the because of all of these programs and the tens of thousands of people who have participated in them, they understand that there is a complete difference between American people and American government policies.
Uh-huh.
So it's and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay. And what are you doing now, Zen?
well, um, I'm mostly doing stuff on Zoom. Excuse me. I can I don't really think of myself as an English teacher because I'm not really good at um, and preparation and objectives and that kind of thing. I call myself an English language consultant.
Uh-huh.
So I do I help people with translations into English. I don't do uh, English into Russian. I get Russian stuff. I edit stuff. I'm actually really good at editing. It turns out,
Uh-huh.
and then I have a conversational practice for people to help them with a lot of people preparing for the IELTS test. So with the writing and speaking sections of the IELTS test, I have done also.
And what test is that? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with
It's
it.
called IELTS, IELTS. It's a British um, Cambridge, I think Cambridge affiliated, but
Yeah.
it stands for International English Language System Testing System or something like that.
Okay.
And it's used by American universities use TOEFL
Right.
and all the other countries use IELTS,
I
but
see.
it's also used for companies and whatnot for in addition to admission to universities, they use it for just assessing people's skills, corporate entities and
Yeah.
government entities and that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's known around the world.
Yeah.
IELTS, IELTS. Anyway, um, That's basically what I do. I
Yeah.
also do a preparation for GRE people. I'm still affiliated with. There's a what's called. Sorry, my brain doesn't work as quickly as it should. Um, it's educational advising centers that are funded by the U.S. State Department,
Uh-huh.
and we have one here in the United States. I used to supervise it when it was under American councils. It's now more independent, um, but the Educational Advising Center is still going. U.S. Jesus, why can't I? Education USA is the
I see.
organization that's funded by the State Department. They have a network of 400 advising centers around the world, encouraging people to seek and promoting U.S. higher education. One of the services they have for in Russia is to give people assistance in preparation for the GRE, the graduate record exam. So I've been contracted to work on the um, what's it called, analytical writing uh,
Okay.
test, which it's interesting because I've never really scored very well myself, and I'm not really very good at doing at writing under pressure. I
Uh-huh.
think I'm a good writer, but I'm not fast,
Yeah.
and and that's so I've never really done well myself. But it's kind of like you know coaches and film directors. Some of
Yeah.
the best film directors are the worst actors that
Right.
could
Right. Right.
but
Right.
they know how to get people to do it. So
Right.
I've really had I think pretty good success with that, and people really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So
Good.
I'm happy
Good.
about
Good.
that. So
Good.
I'm not really making a whole lot of money, but I don't really care so much about the money. My wife is working full time. She's a librarian at the medical the university here in Vladivostok.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we own the apartment. I don't really have. I mean, I'm getting Social Security now. I
Uh-huh.
don't, and that's direct deposited into my bank account in the U.S. I don't. We make enough rubles. I don't have. We own the apartment that we live in, and we don't have a car payment. So it's just that if we make enough money for food and the drugstore and paying for gas,
Right.
that's all we need, and that really is minimal expenses. So basically my Social Security just accumulates in the U.S. and I withdraw when I need to. I mean, very
Right.
minimal amounts,
Yeah.
but I basically use it to support our daughter and that we can make trips. We went to the U.S. for a month in May, June. So
Good.
making a trip to the U.S. cost me probably $10,000, but you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I can afford that because I don't have
You-
the
high living
burdensome living
expense. Yeah.
expenses. And
Yeah.
I've been Vidna Žitelstva, permanent resident here for years. Just last year they passed a law. In the past, in order to I mean, I've been eligible to apply for Russian citizenship, but they've always said that I would need to give up my American
Right.
citizenship. Well,
Right.
of course, I'm not willing to do that. But a year ago, they changed the rules that you can now have, you don't have to give up the American
Huh.
citizenship and you can have dual
You
citizenship.
can have dual
My wife
citizenship.
and daughter have both and have for years. So I'm going to go with that soon.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
it's and at my age, I used to have ambitions, I guess, of getting into the foreign service, but now I'm too old. I don't
Right.
qualify for anything, so
Right. Right.
having dual citizenship is I can't think of any downsides,
Any
you know,
downsides? Right,
at
right.
this point. So
So do you work in any, and you talked about trying to build understanding between Russian and American citizens, people, ordinary people.
yeah,
Is there is there any organizational form that you?
no, and that's another of my, going through COVID, I've had it's been sort of soul searching, and I've had this ambition for years, um, that I would like to create an organization. I hesitate I'm not going to give you the name because I want to get, um, you know, what do you call it? A
Copyright.
trademark. Yeah, copyright trademark before I get started. I've got, some Russian friends, lawyers and whatnot. But I want to create, um, basically, I'm talking about a what I'm thinking of as a a center. How do I call it? A cultural and culinary center, for dedicated to, um, international, communication and understanding, I guess.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So,
Okay.
um, 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 I'm going to be working on that in the next, once I get the citizenship and can get get kind of my legal status straightened out. I basically want to get, an organization that encourages interaction between the, Eastern United States, basically the Chesapeake Bay area, which is my home
Yeah.
area, and the Russian Far East,
Okay.
specifically Vladivostok and Primorsky.